Why sleep? Why now? So why am I talking about sleep? Well, confession time. I've always had a bit of an obsession with it. I've been fascinated by how people used to sleep, long before memory foam mattresses and blackout curtains. And lately, as I navigate through perimenopause and find that a full night's rest is more of a luxury than a given, this topic has become more personal too. You know how it is. In your 20s, sleep is something you actively avoid because you're out late having fun. By your 30s, especially if you have kids, it becomes this rare, sacred thing. And by your 40s and 50s, you start wondering what the heck happened to your body clock. That curiosity led me to a brilliant book I always recommend. At Day's Close, Night in Times Past, by historian A. Roger Ekirch. It's a fascinating and richly detailed exploration of how nighttime worked in early modern Europe. It inspired a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. So, how did people sleep before electricity? Believe it or not, people in the pre-modern world didn't necessarily sleep the way we do today. The idea of going to bed at 11 p.m. and waking up at 7 a.m. for a solid, uninterrupted 8 hours was not the norm for centuries. In fact, there's evidence that most people practiced what we now call segmented sleep, or biphasic sleep. They would go to bed shortly after sunset, sleep for a few hours, then wake up in the middle of the night, around 1 or 2 a.m., stay, awake for an hour or two, and then go back to sleep until dawn. That wakeful period in the middle was used for all kinds of things: prayer, reading, if they were literate, checking on animals, even chatting or being intimate. It was known as the watch. This pattern was a natural response to living without artificial light. Candlelight was expensive and oil lamps were smoky and dim. So once the sun went down, your day largely ended, unless you were among the wealthy or had a good fire and the means to stay up. The social side of sleep was also on a communal experience, especially in the Middle Ages and Renaissance. Privacy as we understand it today simply didn't exist for most people. Families shared beds. Travelers shared beds. Servants often slept at the foot of their masters' beds. Even in castles, the noble lord might sleep with his knights nearby, in the same hall, or with his most trusted allies in his bedchamber. And this wasn't considered odd or inappropriate. It was a main sign of trust and political alliance. In fact, there's a fascinating historical tidbit I love to share. When Henry II of England heard that his son, Richard the Lionheart, had been sharing a bed with Philip II of France, he wasn't scandalized in the modern sense. He was alarmed politically. It signaled that an alliance might be forming between them that could pose a threat to his power. So yes, bed sharing was political. It was emotional. It was strategic. The environment of sleep. Let's talk about what sleep looked like. Physically, most people didn't have beds to themselves. Peasants might sleep on straw-stuffed mattresses called ticks on the floor. Wealthier folks had beds filled with wool or feathers and heavy curtains or tapestries to keep out drafts and provide a small sense of privacy. In castles, the solar was the upper room where the lord and lady slept, usually the only actual private room in the structure. Servants might still be present, sleeping nearby to tend to needs in the night. Children often slept with parents. Guests might share the family bed as a sign of hospitality. And inns? Forget private rooms. You'd likely end up in a shared bed with a stranger. The idea of sleeping alone in a quiet, dark room is a modern luxury, born out of industrialization, electric lighting, and ideas about individualism and personal space. Was it better back then? This kind of communal sleeping and segmented sleep cycle might actually be more natural for human biology. Modern studies have shown that humans often wake briefly in the night. But instead of panicking and reaching for melatonin or a podcast, pre-modern people simply embraced the wakefulness and made use of it. Today, many people feel isolated, disconnected, and unable to sleep well. In contrast, pre-modern people were constantly surrounded by community and family, even while they slept. Maybe there's something to be learned from that. If you're fascinated by this kind of social history, how everyday people actually lived, loved, ate, slept, and survived. In the past, make sure you subscribe and check out my other videos. I talk about all kinds of things from the Tudor era and beyond. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time. Sleep well, however. You do it. You know what's wild? The moment middle age hits, sleep becomes your holy grail. Suddenly, you're obsessed with how you're sleeping, how long you're sleeping, whether you're sleeping well enough, and, let's be honest, whether you'll ever sleep well again. It kinda sneaks up on you. First, you have a baby, and you become absolutely consumed with their sleep, tracking every nap, celebrating the first time they sleep through the night like it's a national holiday. But then quietly that obsession shifts. Now it's about you. You're trying to protect your own sleep like it's some ancient treasure. You're monitoring screen time, diffusing lavender oil, blackout curtaining the bedroom, and doing breathing exercises just to chase a few precious hours of uninterrupted rest. I'm in that stage of life right now, and let me tell you, I totally get it. But here's the kicker. All this fussing over 7 to 8 hours of solid, uninterrupted sleep? That's a completely modern invention. Wait, people didn't always sleep. In one block, exactly. If you go back in time, even just a few centuries, you'll find that people didn't think sleeping all the way through the night in one continuous block was normal. In fact, for most of human history, people practiced what we now call biphasic sleep. That is, they slept in 2 distinct segments. This isn't just speculation or guesswork. It's been documented. One of the most fascinating resources on this topic is the book At Day's Close, Night in Times Past by historian A. Roger E. Kirch. I love this book, and honestly, it's changed the way I think about sleep. E. Kirch stumbled upon this concept while reading a legal document from 1699. In it, a 9-year-old girl named Jane Ralph casually mentioned waking up from her first sleep. That phrase, first sleep, caught E. Kirch's attention. To most people, it might have seemed like nothing, but for him, it was a breadcrumb that led to a huge discovery. First sleep and second sleep. A lost rhythm, what Kirch found was astonishing. For millennia, people across different cultures referred to first sleep and second sleep as if it were completely ordinary, because it was. Here's how it worked. People would go to bed shortly after sunset. Remember, there was no electricity, so the night was truly dark and quiet. They would sleep for about 3 to 4 hours. Then, sometime around midnight or 1 a.m., they'd wake up, completely naturally, and stay awake for an hour or 2. This wasn't considered insomnia. It was simply part of the routine. During this in-between period called the watch, people did all kinds of things, prayed, read, or meditated, if literate, tended to animals, spent time with their spouse even, visited neighbors. Then, after this watch, they would go back to sleep for a second shift until dawn. This rhythm was completely ordinary and didn't require explanation in historical texts, because everyone just knew that's how sleep worked. So, why don't we sleep like this anymore? The shift away from biphasic sleep started in the 17th and 18th centuries, and it accelerated with urbanization and artificial lighting. As candles, oil lamps, and eventually gas and electric lights became more accessible, people stayed up later. Night became illuminated and social. Cities buzzed well after sundown. Gradually, bedtime moved later and later, consolidating sleep into one block to accommodate new work schedules and social habits. By the time the Industrial Revolution kicked into full gear, the modern 8-hour sleep cycle was becoming the new norm. Modern sleep trouble? Maybe it's history calling. Here's something to consider. Maybe our struggle to sleep through the night isn't always insomnia. Maybe it's our bodies reverting to a natural rhythm that was common for thousands of years. Fun fact, my husband is living proof. For as long as I've known him, and we've been together for 20 years, he's had this secret life in the middle of the night. He'll get up around 2 a.m., fix himself a snack, play video games, sometimes even strum his guitar. Then by 4 a.m., he's back in bed and sleeping like a log until morning. He didn't even know this was once a totally normal way to sleep. But there he is, channeling his inner medieval villager like a champ. Sleep isn't just biological, it's cultural. The way we sleep today isn't set in stone. It's a reflection of our time, our technology, our work lives, and our beliefs about productivity and rest. In pre-modern times, sleep was more flexible, communal, and ritualized. Now it's isolated, rigid, and often anxiety-inducing. So if you're waking up at 3 a.m. and thinking you're broken, maybe you're just perfectly medieval. Want to learn more? Fascinating facts about everyday life and history, from Tudor England to medieval sleeping habits? Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a new episode or video. Thanks for watching, and here's wishing you a good night, whether in one sleep or two. Biphasic, segmented. Sleep, a forgotten rhythm of the night. Biphasic sleep, also known as segmented sleep, refers to the historical and natural pattern of dividing one's nightly rest into two distinct phases, the first sleep and the second, sleep. Between these two sleep segments was a period of quiet wakefulness known historically as the watch. Far from being an oddity or a sleep disorder, this pattern was once a widespread and culturally embedded norm throughout pre-industrial societies around the world. Historical evidence of segmented sleep. Historical documents are rich with references to this nocturnal rhythm. For example, Geoffrey Chaucer mentioned it in the Canterbury Tales. William Baldwin described it in his 16th century satire, Beware the Cat. It appears in medical texts, personal letters, diaries, and even in folk ballads. In the old ballad of Robin, of Portingale, one line reads, "At the awakening of your first sleep, you shall have a hot drink made." The practice wasn't limited to England or Western Europe. In fact, references appear across France, where it was called premier sommeil, Italy, primo sonno, and even as far afield as Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia. This suggests biphasic sleep was a global phenomenon, deeply rooted in human behavior and daily life, especially before the widespread adoption of artificial lighting. What a night looked like in the 16th century. A typical night in the 1500s would differ dramatically from modern sleep habits. People usually went to bed shortly after sunset, around 9 p.m. Sleeping arrangements were communal. Families, servants, and even travelers might share a bed, especially in inns or crowded homes. Beds themselves varied. Wealthier individuals had feather or straw mattresses, while poorer people might sleep on bundles of grass or even directly on the floor. After 2 to 3 hours of sleep, individuals would naturally awaken, often stirred by church bells marking religious hours like Compline or Matins. This watch period, lasting 1 to 3 hours, was not a time of restlessness but rather a time of quiet activity and connection. What people did during the watch. The wakeful period between sleeps was remarkably productive and peaceful. Activities included household chores, e.g., stoking fires, preparing food, mending clothes. Religious practices such as prayer, scripture reading, or meditation. Checking livestock or planning farm tasks for the next day. Brewing beer, or making candles quiet. Conversations with one's spouse and often intimate relations, as this was a rare private moment. Some even used the time for creative or intellectual pursuits, reading, writing, or philosophical reflection. This period was sometimes seen as a secret hour, a sacred pause in the day's chaos when the world was silent and one could reconnect with family, faith, or the self. Ancient origins and evolutionary logic. The roots of biphasic sleep go back even further. References appear in ancient texts such as Homer's Odyssey and in works by Roman authors like Livy and Virgil. Many scholars believe this sleep pattern was adaptive for early humans. Breaking sleep into two parts allowed for periodic alertness, a survival advantage in the presence of predators or other dangers. This type of segmented sleep is mirrored in nature. Many animals sleep in short bursts for similar evolutionary reasons. Even today, if you have a pet cat or dog, you may notice they often sleep in segments, waking up in the middle of the night, alert and active for a brief spell before dozing again. The Industrial Revolution and the decline of biphasic sleep. By the 19th century, the ancient rhythm of segmented sleep began to fade. What caused this profound shift? The main catalyst was the Industrial Revolution. With the rise of gas lamps and eventually electric lighting, the night was no longer ruled by darkness. Artificial illumination allowed people to stay up later, go out socially, and shift their sleep schedules. Work schedules also changed. The industrial economy demanded long hours, early shifts, punctuality. As a result, people began to consolidate their sleep into one uninterrupted block, often from late evening to early morning. This monophasic sleep model, sleeping in one 7-8 hour chunk, became standard, particularly in Western societies, and the once common first sleep, watch, second sleep structure was largely forgotten. Why it matters. Today, understanding. Biphasic sleep gives us valuable insights into our own sleep struggles. For example, waking up at 2 or 3 a.m. and lying awake for an hour is often seen as a sleep disorder today. But historically, it was entirely normal. Some people naturally follow biphasic or polyphasic sleep cycles, and this may be more aligned with human biology than the industrial era 8-hour block. As interest grows in sleep science, circadian rhythms, and natural living, some are revisiting segmented sleep as a healthier, more intuitive model. Conclusion. What segmented sleep means for us today. The story of segmented sleep isn't just an interesting historical footnote. It's a reminder that what we consider normal today might not be the natural state of human rest. In fact, this forgotten habit of dividing the night into 2 sleep phases challenges many of our modern assumptions about sleep health and insomnia. For example, waking up in the middle of the night, something that many people, especially women, in midlife experience is often treated as a problem. We label it insomnia, we worry about it, and we try to fix it with medication or sleep aids. But when you consider the historical precedent, this midnight wakefulness may not be a disorder at all. It could be a natural and deeply ingrained part of our biology. In the 1990s, sleep researcher Dr. Thomas Weir conducted a landmark experiment to explore this very idea. He recreated pre-industrial light conditions, exposing participants to just 10 hours of light per day, simulating a world without electricity. What happened was remarkable. After just a few weeks, participants' bodies naturally shifted into biphasic sleep, falling asleep for several hours, waking peacefully for 1 to 3 hours, and then returning to a second sleep until morning. This study strongly suggests that segmented sleep is not just cultural, it's physiological. Our modern lifestyle, with its artificial lights, late-night screens, and rigid work schedules, may have simply suppressed a natural human rhythm. Reframing insomnia as a natural rhythm for those who find themselves waking up in the early PM hours, this information can be more than just interesting, it can be comforting. Rather than viewing this wakefulness as a malfunction, we might instead see it as an opportunity. A quiet, introspective pause in the middle of the night, deeply rooted in the way humans have lived for centuries. Maybe this time, what our ancestors called the watch isn't a disruption but a gift, a sacred hour for thought, prayer, creativity, conversation, or just peace. Historically, this was a time people connected with loved ones, completed quiet chores, or reflected under the soft glow of candlelight and moonlight. A gentle invitation to rethink sleep, so perhaps it's time we reconsider the modern ideal of uninterrupted 8-hour sleep. It's not necessarily the only or the best way to rest. For some, especially those who wake naturally during the night, returning to a more organic biphasic pattern might feel more restful, more natural, and less stressful. If you're someone who does experience middle-of-the-night wakefulness, you're not alone and you're not broken. You may simply be more in tune with an ancient rhythm your body hasn't forgotten. Let's keep the conversation going. Have you experienced biphasic sleep? Do you find yourself awake at 2 a.m., perhaps reading, journaling, or just sitting in stillness? I'd love to hear about it. Feel free to share your experiences or thoughts in the comments. If this resonated with you, please consider liking, subscribing, or sharing. It helps this kind of thoughtful, history-rooted content reach others who might benefit from it. And finally, just a gentle reminder, you are deeply loved. I'm so grateful to share this planet and these quiet moonlit moments with you. Don't forget to drink your water, take care, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.